I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat. Yes, Miss Wayne.
Do you start by stating your full name, please?
My name is John Keith Andrew Hicklin.
And if we could have your witness statement on screen, it's GMMH 4014. Is this your witness statement?
It is.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Just start with some questions about your background and experience. We can take the statement down, thank you. So, as I understand it, you qualified as a mental health nurse in 1988?
That's correct.
And you've been working in adolescent forensic community service from 2000?
Yes.
And FCAMS, Forensic Children and Adolescent Mental Health Service that we've been referring to, started operating in 2017, is that right?
I believe that to be correct, yes.
And at the time of your contact in relation to AR's case, in 2019 and 2020, you were working as a clinical nurse specialist within FCAMS, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And as I understand it, you have retired in May 2022. I think you carried on working, you returned to work for a few days a week for a short period, but pretty much then you've been retired.
Right. Yep.
And you're retired now?
I am, yeah.
Thank you. So just to start by understanding the role of FCAMS, is it right that FCAMS is commissioned by the Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust to operate its services in the North West?
Yes. I believe that to be correct, yes.
And putting it very simply, does FCAMS have three key roles? Firstly, consultation and advice.
Yes, that would be one role, yes.
If you just keep your voice up, just so it gets picked up by the microphone,
Yep.
Thank you. Secondly, assessment.
Yes, I think that's...
We'll come on to the detail of what it means
Yeah.
later. And thirdly, in some limited cases, it's some intervention, as I understand it.
That's correct, yes.
If we could bring on screen GMMH 4015. This should be the corporate statement from FCAMS provided by Dr. Imran and Ms. Brown. If we could have a look at page 3, please. And paragraph 2 there in the middle. So we said the first role was advice, and they've explained here that the FCAMS practitioner will engage with professionals closely involved with the young person to gather pertinent information. It's utilised to form a structured narrative of the young person's difficulties, integrating information from various sources to elucidate reasons for presentation, development and maintenance, and subsequently provide guidance and recommendations to professionals working with the young person to address areas of unmet need and mitigate high-risk behaviours. Is that a fair summary of the advisory and consultation role?
Yeah, definitely.
Then if we could zoom out again and look at the next paragraph down, which is assessment. Here they explain that in complex high-risk cases where it's not been possible to develop a formulation from consultation and a specialist opinion is required, an FCAMS practitioner will undertake a direct assessment. This involves interviewing the young person, their parents and carers, and if necessary, specialist assessment tools. And then an assessment report is developed, which provides recommendations to the professional network. Does that paragraph fairly summarise the assessment role?
Yes, it does, yes.
So you'd only be carrying out this assessment in high-risk cases where there's a need for a specialist opinion. Is that fair?
Sorry, can you just say that again, please?
So assessment would only typically be done in complex high-risk cases where you need a specialist opinion, is that right?
I think where it hasn't been possible to gain a full understanding of risk and risk management strategies at a consultative level, then consideration of assessment then would take place.
And within the FCAM statements, there's some reference to a forensic assessment. Is that referring to this type of assessment?
I would say that arguably both the consultation and this kind of assessment could be classed as, well, I guess the consultation would be classed as a forensic understanding, and this assessment, I think, yes, I think that's the same thing. I don't know what specific bit of information you're referring to, but I would imagine it's the same thing as this, yes.
Thank you. And is this assessment that we're talking about here, is this different to a risk assessment? And if so, how?
I would say it was different. I would say this assessment that we're talking about in this Section 3 assessment is, as suggested, it's where we would go out probably actually with two clinicians, I would imagine, and interview family and the young person. We'd still have a consultation meeting if that hadn't taken place already with professionals as part of that process. Consider any other information that's pertinent, and then produce probably what would be perhaps a longer report, a bit more in-depth report than you will see from my letters that were around a professional consultation. Does that answer your question? Is that? Yes.
So is it right that this assessment and the report that would follow, that wouldn't be a substitute for a risk assessment?
I think that our service, as I think has been stated, would avoid kind of completing, in quotation marks, a risk assessment of a young person. We would see that as primarily the responsibility of the local agency with care coordinating responsibility to complete a risk assessment. We would contribute by trying to help to understand that risk rather than per se completing a risk assessment.
I understand, thank you. We'll come on to risk assessments later. If we could then go back to this statement that we have on the screen and look at the next paragraph down, which goes over the page, intervention, and this was the third limb of FCAMS's role that we touched upon. And here it explains that an FCAMS practitioner can provide supervision to community practitioners in line with the consultation model, providing training, reflection, or guidance to address issues identified within the formulation, psychoeducation around diagnosis, and time-limited support to young people to understand their formulation. Is that a fair summary of, if you were going to have some kind of intervention role, that's what you would be doing?
I don't think that is reflective of the service when I was part of the service. I think that's reflective of some changes in the service that have taken place subsequent to my retirement. I would have seen, if you'd have given me that title to talk to without the bit underneath, I would have talked about kind of potential involvement post-assessment directly with the young person if it was appropriate for our service to do interventions at that point with a young person. I think that first whole sentence paragraph there is reflective of how the service currently works rather than how it did work when I was a member of the team.
I understand. And when looking back to the time when you had contact with AR's case, so end of 2019, start of 2020, what would have FCAMS's role in intervention have looked like?
I don't think that in AR's case it did not progress to intervention. I think,
I understand that. Just if it had done, what would it look like?
Well, it probably would have progressed first to I think we're talking hypothetically here. It could have progressed to an assessment first, and I think that would have taken place first. And then if there were additional, I suppose in the cases of where young people have engaged with that process of assessment with our service, and where it was felt to be that perhaps our service could offer further appointments to continue to develop a relationship perhaps with that young person, then it may be that we would offer some additional appointments to consider whether it is in fact our service that could provide some intervention for a young person. And that's I think where that would have naturally gone when I was a member of the team, not necessarily as indicated in this particular document.
I understand that. And what options for intervention did you have to offer young people if you got to that stage at that time?
Well, I guess that would be case by case dependent on their particular presentation and clinical need. I guess that, you know, that may be kind of one-to-one kind of working with a young person. Whilst I was saying, I think this is kind of reflective of what happened since I've retired. You know, we could also work alongside, when I was working, we could also work alongside the referring agency who may have been working with the young person and offering additional support to the interventions that they were providing. And or indeed, as suggested and indicated, we could potentially provide intervention around high risk and offending behaviour.
Turning then to the role of FCAMs in risk assessments generally, we can take that document down. Thank you, Sarah. This is covered in more detail by the other witnesses from FCAMs, one of which we'll be hearing from later. But I just want to have your personal understanding first. You said at paragraph 11 of your statement, I think you alluded to this earlier today, that it's not your role, it's not the role of FCAMs to complete a formal risk assessment, but to contribute to the understanding of risk with the professionals that are working directly with the young person. Is that fair?
That's fair, yeah.
So FCAMs, as you understood it, you wouldn't be conducting a formal or a structured risk assessment?
No, in fact, I think we would have been, by senior staff within the team, made very clear that that's exactly what we weren't doing, if you know what I mean. That's not a double negative. That's we wouldn't be doing that.
I understand. And the inquiry's heard some evidence about a type of structured risk assessment called a SAVRI assessment. Is that something you're familiar with?
Yes, very familiar, yeah.
And does that fall within the category of risk assessments that, as you understand it, FCAMs wouldn't carry out?
Not quite. I think, I suppose people have different things that come into the mind when you say risk assessment. When somebody says risk assessment, I think it is a specific assessment of violence risk by its title. That's what it's about. But whether that would be classed as, you know, if somebody was thinking about kind of having a holistic risk assessment of a young person, I think that would just be addressing one aspect of their high risk behaviour, which is to do with violence. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So would FCAMs carry out SAVRI assessments?
Well, I guess that sort of we would do that alongside local services who would be responsible for any outcome of that SAVRI assessment. So the point of probably any assessment is what comes out of that for any agency to take forward in terms of the recommendations that would come out of an assessment. And the SAVRI definitely would highlight areas for intervention. And so we would be keen to, if we were going to think about doing a SAVRI, to do it alongside local services and agencies that were able to take forward any outcome from the SAVRI. So I think we'd have to be clear that from the beginning that's what would likely happen. So I have, for example, worked through the aspects of the SAVRI with professionals in consultation meetings and as part of an assessment, but with the intention that what comes out with that would guide interventions that we wouldn't necessarily be completing, that it would be the responsibility of local services to complete's the wrong word, but kind of do those interventions.
So in relation to Asabri, would you say that FCAMS had a supporting role or a leading role?
That's a good question. I think I'd go with supporting role as being a better description given what I've just said.
I understand. If we could bring your statement up on screen, and it's page 3, paragraph 10. Thank you. So you say here that during your employment with FCAMS, the responsibility for assessing and managing the young person's risk remained with the referrer or lead professional involved in the case. This was the agreed practice at the time. I would, however, support their risk assessment process by gathering information about the young person's behaviour and risk during the consultation or through assessment, and I'd use this information to develop an understanding of this risk in the context of underlying mental health or neurodevelopmental conditions, and then provide advice and recommendations for inclusion in their risk management plan. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
So who would typically be the lead professional? How would that be decided?
Again, I suppose that's a bit case-by-case basis, if I'm honest. It would often be the referrer. I think often, kind of local agencies, when decided to make a referral, and agencies being aware of a referral taking place, would probably decide who was the best person to make that referral, and they, in most cases, ended up being the person I would say we would see as a case holder and responsible for that. But that potentially could be from any of the likely agencies that would refer to our service, and that I suppose typically would be children's social care, the youth justice service, mental health, child and adolescent mental health services. I would say they were the typical ones that would be seen as a case holder.
And I appreciate you say it depends on a case-by-case basis, but in a particular case, how is it decided? Would that be discussed at a professionals meeting and agreed?
Yeah, I mean, I think once a case is allocated to a clinician, say for example me, once a case is allocated to me, like in AR's case, the first thing that I would do would be to make some contact with the referrer to set up the professionals meeting, as I did in AR's case. And I suppose that process allows some initial understanding of how the referrer fits into that system. And if it was, I can't remember it happening all that often, if at all, but if it was clearly that they weren't going to be the case holder, I would at that point likely find out who was going to be the case holder. And I mean, on occasions would have had to kind of be clear that we do need a case holder. If there was nobody that was going to be holding that case, that we would need a case holder to be able to effectively respond.
I understand. So I think that's a good time to turn to look at the referral of AR to FCAMS. So if we could have a look at GMMH 502. We see here what's called an FCAMS telephone advice form.
Yeah.
And it's a record of a call from Stephanie Halloran
Yes.
to the duty clinician at FCAMS.
Yes.
And we've obtained a statement separately from Miss Halloran, and she, as I understand it, worked for the Criminal Justice Liaison and Diversion Team,
Yes.
which is based out of Merseyside NHS Trust. Is that right?
Yes.
So here we can see it's a call on the 12th of December 2019. It's about AR. If we go over the page to page 2, could we just zoom in on the box that says reasons for telephone contact? Thank you. So we can see there, arrested yesterday, possession of a bladed article, offensive weapon, section 47 assault, no previous contact with YJS, which I understand to be Youth Justice Services.
I would think so, yes. Yeah.
Known and open to prevent team, Googled about mass killings, beheadings, ISIS, took hockey stick into school and assaulted boy, previous exclusion for taking knives into school, ASD presentation, no diagnosis, no remorse, downward arrow empathy. Did you get given this advice form at the point when you later, I know you weren't assigned at this time, but did you later come to see this advice form?
I haven't seen this advice form, but that wouldn't necessarily have been the system as I remember the system from 3 years ago. I wouldn't necessarily have seen this. I think by that time we would have had a formal referral from the well, in this case from Stephanie O'Halloran, and that's what I would have had rather than the handwritten advice form. I'm not saying that wasn't on the system. That probably was on the system, but I can't remember ever seeing this. And whether I did or not, I don't know, but it's possible.
And then we see the advice given is noted as advice to refer to FCAMS, yes, advise strategy meeting, invite all relevant organisations, FCAMS will attend given notice, and at the bottom refer to CAMS for ASD assessment and mental health screening. If we could then have a look at GMMH 503, this is the actual FCAMS referral form, which I think is the document that you were just referring to.
Yeah.
So is this the form that you would have been provided
Yeah.
with and reviewed at the start of your involvement?
Yeah.
So that's dated the following day, the 13th of December 2019. And we can see that the referrer is the same person, Stephanie Halloran.
Yeah.
If we could have a look at page 4, please. We can see near the top of the page, I'm not going to obviously read all of this out, but I'll just pick out a few key points. Near the top of the page, reference to the hockey stick attack, use of hockey stick to hit another student and admitting to having a knife. You see that?
Yes.
If we could look further down into presenting problems. Fifth line down, AR reports that he wouldn't have felt sad if he hurt him.
Yes.
He was asked if he was planning on killing the student, and he replied, I did want to kill him, but I don't think I would. Ideally, I wish I did it, but they were in assembly, so it wouldn't have happened. He was clear this was revenge. So you're aware of that?
Was I aware of that?
At the time?
I would have been, yes.
Further down, we see that he says that AR reported that he liked the student he had hit and never had any problems with the boy. This is 5 lines up from the bottom of that paragraph.
Yeah.
And AR reports it doesn't bother him that he assaulted the boy, as he didn't get hurt that bad. If we could zoom out again. I'm not going to go through the letter, but if you can take it from me, that it also mentions that Prevent were involved. Is that right?
Yeah, I think from memory, I'd have to look at my letter, but I think from memory, I think by the time of the first consultation meeting, they were no longer involved.
And do you also recall it flagging that there were some serious concerns about his use of the internet and the material that he was accessing? Yes. So looking at those, there's more features than that in the letter, but those are some key features. Looking at those factors together, do you agree that there's a concoction there of really very concerning factors?
Absolutely, yes.
Could we have a look at page 8, please? And the very bottom line. So there's a list of bullet points which are said to be the further risk management plan. One of the bullet points is discuss with Band 7 Annie Kelly if a Savary assessment is appropriate. Are you able to assist us with who that is or what organisation she worked for?
Forgive me, but we're looking at the referral form from Stephanie Halloran to our service. I presume that Anne Kelly works for her service, or with her service alongside. I don't know who Anne Kelly is.
Do you remember having? Do you remember what your understanding was when you received the referral as to whether somebody else was going to be carrying out a Savary assessment?
I can't say that I remember that, no. I have some further comment about the Savary assessment from my first letter, I think, but that was following the professional consultation, so that was a little bit further along than this document that we're currently looking at.
Right, and if we could just go over the page, please. The anticipated outcome is a possible assessment and risk management plan. So I understand this to be Stephanie Halloran saying that was what she is anticipating being a potential outcome. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, that sounds like what she was asking for, yeah.
What's your understanding of a risk management plan? What is that and who would be doing it?
Well, that sounds like those two things are connected in what Stephanie was expecting from our service at that time.
I understand. So would you understand that to be an expectation from her that you would be potentially carrying out a forensic assessment and also doing a risk management plan?
I think that... I mean, I obviously can't remember. I honestly can't remember what was going on in my head at the time of kind of accepting this referral and, kind of setting up the meetings. But I certainly would have been clear in our professional consultation meeting what the scope of that meeting was. That, as I think can be seen from the letters that I wrote, included what I would say would be the elements of a risk management plan as such, that was agreed with the professionals on that date. In terms of the possible assessment, I certainly didn't give. I mean, I think like we read out initially, there was three elements to our service: professional consultation and then assessment by our service. So clearly that would have been out there for Stephanie to think and hope that was what was going to happen in this case, perhaps. But I certainly don't think I gave her any indication that we would be doing an assessment, and I wouldn't do that at this stage before a professional consultation has taken place.
I understand. So the risk management plan reference there, you would understand that to be essentially the steps that you did in AR's case, and we'll come to look at the letters later, but the making of recommendations after
Yes.
a consultation.
Yes.
So we know from your statement, of course, that the referral following this form, which we can take down now, thank you, was accepted and it was allocated to you.
Yes.
As well as that referral form that we've looked at, what other information, if any, would you have from, for example, other agencies about AR?
Again, a slight difference in case by case. Sometimes the referral itself is accompanied by documentation from other agencies. I think if it was in AR's case to be that, then that would have, they would, I'm sure, have been known to this inquiry. So if they're not, then they wouldn't have been attached.
All right, so you're not able to assist us with your recollection of any further records you were provided with in relation to AR at the start of your involvement?
I'm not, no.
And the inquiry has received some evidence which initially appeared to suggest that one of the reasons for the referral to FCAMS was a suspected conduct disorder. I won't bring the document up, but sir, for your reference, it's MERP 000178 at page 12.
Thank you.
So there was a record that did list what the reason for referral as suspected conduct disorder. The inquiry asked Miss Halloran about that, and she said in her statement, which again we don't need to bring up, but the reference is MERC 4026, page 19, paragraph 52. She said, I did not have any specific concerns around AR having a conduct disorder at that time and cannot provide any rationale for why this was listed as a referral reason. I just wanted to check whether you were aware at any stage of the reason for referral being said to be a suspected conduct disorder.
Having reviewed my own letters and the documentation that I've seen, I've not seen reference to conduct disorder. I have heard it. I think seen another statement, but I've not. At the time, I don't remember that being a factor.
I understand. And just for our understanding, is a conduct disorder something that FCAMS would have potentially been able to assess and diagnose for, or would that not fall within your remit?
I think potentially through the second part of the assessment of a young person and with full understanding, it would be possible for FCAMS to make some comments around whether or not he would meet the threshold for what really is a formulation approach to looking at severe I don't know whether the right word is delinquent behaviour, and kind of I'm sure that FCAMS could comment. It was, if I'm honest with you, it was like kind of something that we, perhaps in early stages of my involvement with what was previously the facts team, which became FCAMS, we probably had more involvement with that kind of consideration of conduct disorder at that stage. I would say I didn't come across it for a few years where that was an expectation or a question at referral, or anything that anybody was questioning in latter years.
So are you able to assist us with whether, in AR's case, you ever gave any thought to whether he may have a conduct disorder or not?
I wouldn't have been given that as a specific thing, a specific question as to whether or not he had conduct disorder. No.
Okay, so FCAMS would be dependent on somebody flagging that as an issue in the referral for you to consider it. You wouldn't consider it of your own volition.
I think unless in conversation, that kind of, I suppose, that was flagging any alarm bells that was that was a specific issue. I think it didn't, and even on reflection of my letters, I don't think that was what came out as a pressing issue.
Right.
If that answers the question, sorry.
So back to the acceptance of the referral, I understand from your statement that you emailed Miss Halloran the same day you got allocated to suggest a date to try and have a first meeting. And we know that there was a multi-agency meeting that took place on the 17th of December 2019, but I understand that you weren't able to attend that meeting. Yeah. Did you consider whether to arrange for somebody else from FCAMS to attend? Is that something you would usually do?
Not necessarily something we would usually do. I mean, I guess that sort of once the case is allocated and other people are busy with their cases, that would be unlikely that somebody would have the ability to be able to sort of, with short notice, go to a meeting about another case. It may have been possible. I don't know whether I considered it at the time. I can't remember.
All right. But we do know that the first multi-agency consultation meeting which you could attend was on the 21st of January 2020. And you've explained in your statement that essentially the purpose of this meeting was to gather information about AR's background, presentation, behaviour and risk.
That's correct, yes.
And to use that information to develop understandings of his risks and needs.
Yes.
And then also to provide recommendations to the professionals that were involved with AR.
That's correct, yes.
Could we have on screen LCC 4020, please? Thank you. So this is a note of the meeting from that day, and we see at the start we've got a list of attendees. AR's CAMS case manager at that time was Mr. Scott Morgan, and we can see he's not on one of the list of attendees. Is that right? He didn't attend that meeting?
That's in my letter as well, yes.
Would you have expected him or someone else from CAMS to attend a meeting such as this?
Yes, I guess so, yes.
If we could then look at the first paragraph, we can see there's some discussion about the hockey stick incident. Miss Halloran was raising concerns that AR had assaulted a child that he said he liked, and that the assault was severe. 2 lines from the bottom, we've got the child was very lucky not to have been seriously hurt. And then if we look at the second paragraph from the bottom of the same page, it says, so it's talking about you describe the work that your team does. They consider higher risk and offending behaviour. And following this meeting, you decide whether the service was able to offer anything and whether it was necessary to meet AR and his family. And then the bottom paragraph, it says John H. then turned to Joe H., who I understand to be Joanne Hodson, the then deputy head teacher of Acorns School.
That's correct, yeah.
It said John H. then turned to Joe H. and said, I've been thinking about what you said before. I don't have a crystal ball. None of us have. We can't say whether he's likely to offend again. There are kids who have carried out serious offences. They still have a right to an education. And Joe H. replied, that might be so, but she wasn't prepared to explain to a parent why a child at our school has been seriously injured. Do you recall that exchange?
I certainly don't remember saying all of that in the way that it is said. However, I wouldn't see what was said as being inaccurate. I think what is likely, I can comment on what I think I'm likely to have meant by those comments, but these are not my notes. you know.
I appreciate they're not your notes. It appears to be a set of notes attempting to accurately set out what was said at the meeting, though. I appreciate there may be some paraphrasing here and there.
Yeah, and I would have to comment that I don't think that that's an accurate reflection of the context of that discussion at that time, which I felt was discussion. Obviously, you may come on to ask me this kind of question, but we would start the meeting by asking all professionals to go round the room and say what they felt were the risk and the needs of a young person, and then probably go back around the room and ask people to contribute to what would be needed to manage those risks and needs. And that's the way that discussion would have taken place and information would have been gathered. And I would advocate that, you know, kind of there would have been a shared understanding of risk, but I would have been keen to have a conversation primarily about how that risk was going to be managed. You know, kind of, and I think this discussion will have taken place in the context of him being outside of education at the time of this first meeting, and that in itself is a known risk indicator. So I would have been keen for that to have been addressed, and I think that's probably more the context of the conversation, the discussion that was being had at the time.
All right, I appreciate, given it's a note of what was said at the meeting, that some of the context may have been lost, but it's quite a specific comment, and it's a contemporaneous note of the meeting. Do you accept it's probably a more likely recording of what was said than perhaps how you might remember it down the line?
I think I understand your question. I would say that the letter that I wrote after this meeting is a fair and agreed summary of the meeting, and I, at the bottom of that first letter, asked anybody who received it if there was any disagreement with the letter to come back to me. This, however, isn't that. This is somebody else's notes that I didn't ask for, and there was no opportunity for anybody to question these notes. As I said at the beginning, don't remember saying that comment or the other comments that are where I'm quoted as saying specific things. I'm not saying I didn't say it, and I would agree with it. I would still agree that nobody can predict the risk. And I would still agree that none of us do have a crystal ball in that particular situation. But I don't remember saying those comments, and I find the out of contextness of them to be difficult to comment on, really.
All right. Well, the inquiry's got a witness statement from Joanne Hodgson, and she'll be giving evidence, so we'll be able to pick that up.
Yeah.
In terms of her recollections of the meeting then. If that is an accurate record of what was said, do you agree that that would be quite a surprising comment to make for FCAMs, whose role is to gather information about risk and to develop an understanding about risk?
As I think I've said, no, I don't. I think it's none of us do have the ability to predict the future, and it wasn't the role of FCAMs to predict the future. It was the role of FCAMs to consider what risk management strategies need to be in place to manage the identified risk. That, as I understand, would be the role of FCAMs, about risk management, not about predicting future. If that's what you're getting at, if I've understood the question correctly.
Right. I think let's look at the other comment that's made in the meeting. And this is, if we could zoom out again and go to the next page, please. If we could have a look at paragraph 4, please. It says that you asked about an ASD diagnosis and whether there was any HCP. Is that something you would have asked?
I think that's very likely. I would have asked that, yeah.
The school provides an update. Joanne Hodgson says that when asked why he had brought a knife to school on multiple occasions, AR had replied to use it. His thinking was very literal. She described the frustration of trying to engage with other agencies for the incident in December. Does that ring a bell with the types of concern that was raised by the school?
I think definitely the premeditated and calculated and coldness to AR's behaviour at the time. Violent behaviour was very clearly stated by probably all agencies represented at that meeting. But yes, definitely in this context, I think that would have been very clearly stated.
And then again, John H. repeated that there were no crystal balls and that he'd offer a £5 bet to anyone who could say what was going to happen next. He said that AR clearly needed some sort of specialist provision with ongoing therapy and social stories, but unfortunately you've been left holding the baby. Do you recall saying that?
I think, again, that lacks some context to the situation to make that a kind of to make that make sense, really. The situation was clear from my first letter that AR was outside of education, and as I said previously, that in itself is a risk, a known risk factor, he was suspended, I believe, from at the time of this first meeting from the ACORN provision, and I was keen to know how we were going to move forward from that, so how we could identify some risk management strategies so that he could return to some kind of formal education.
Yeah, I understand that there's context that may have been somewhat lost in summary notes such as this, but do you recall saying that comment we've just heard?
But unfortunately, you've been left holding the baby.
Yes, and that there's no crystal balls and that you'd offer a £5 bet.
I don't recall saying that. I can't remember saying that. But again, I would say that they are clearly in the context of me advocating that we consider risk management strategies as opposed to discussing the risk. At that stage, we were discussing the risk. We're giving people opportunity to say where the risk was. This was about, I would say, thinking about the future and how we move on from an understanding of the risk to finding a way to kind of manage that in a community setting. If I can say, if it's possible for me to say, that at this stage we were clearly thinking about managing AR in the community. There was no suggestion that AR was, kind of, for example, going to be subject to the Mental Health Act or to a social care order or youth justice order that would mean that he wouldn't be in the community anymore at this stage. So it was about risk management strategies in the community, and that's, that's where my thoughts would have been coming from at the time.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time going over this. You say you don't remember saying it. Is it also right that you can't say you didn't say it?
I can't say I didn't say it, and I can't say that I would disagree with the essence of the fact that we can't predict the future.
I understand. To an outsider looking at both of those comments, it looks rather like you were suggesting reactive rather than a proactive approach, essentially just waiting for the next thing to happen to see what was going to happen.
I would say that I would have to refute that, and I would say my evidence for refuting that would be my own letter of summary of this particular meeting, which I think clearly highlights the conversation that we were having, recognises the conversation we were having to identify the risk, and strategies that would mitigate that risk, and At no stage did I don't think that my letter is reactive at all.
All right. Could we look, if we could zoom out again, please? Could we look at the next page, please? 3 paragraphs from the bottom, Anna J. So I think that's a reference to Anna Jameson at Children's Social Care from LCC. Is that right?
Possibly, yes, yeah.
She said she'd been directed at the strategy meeting to carry out a risk assessment, but she didn't think she could do this. It should be education. Joe H. pointed out that Anna had only essentially been asked to do a risk assessment about a tutor visiting AR's house, and she said that she'd be fine doing that. But it's right, isn't it, when we look at this note of the meeting, that it wasn't agreed at this meeting who, if anyone, was going to be conducting a risk assessment in AR's case.
A risk assessment with regard to whether or not he could have a tutor at home?
No, a wider risk assessment, looking at the risks he posed to others.
It wouldn't have been entirely clear at that stage, no.
All right. And is it right that there was also no discussion about who was going to be the lead agency in AR's case?
At the stage of the first meeting, I think that as per the referral form, Stephanie Halloran recognised herself to be the lead agency and coordinating person. So I think that I would have seen her as being the lead agency at this stage. But that's not necessarily saying that she had to do the risk assessment as to whether he could have a tutor at home. I think that
No.
may have fallen to education services to do that.
All right. So your understanding was that Miss Halloran was going to be the lead professional for AR's case at that time?
Yes, until her involvement was likely to come to a conclusion, yes.
All right. Following this meeting, you sent a letter to Miss Halloran basically summarising the issues that were discussed and
Yes.
Making some initial recommendations.
Yes.
If we could get that up on screen, it's GMMH 506. This is a letter dated the 11th of February, and we can see at the top it's addressed to Miss Halloran. I just want to pause there to ask you this. Do you recall whether this letter and the second letter that you sent about AR were sent to CAMS as well as Miss Halloran?
Okay, well, my practice at the time would have been to send it to the case coordinator to send on to her colleagues. As she set up the meeting, as I thanked her for setting up the meeting, I would have also made it clear that she would share the letter with professionals as she sees fit.
All right, so your understanding was that Miss Halloran was going to distribute this to
Yes.
for example, the CAMS case manager?
Yes.
Because the inquiries heard evidence from Dr. Killen, the clinical lead at CAMS, that essentially when she took over the file after the case manager left and she was looking at it, she noticed that this letter and your other letter were missing, and she requested them to be sent over in May 2020. So it doesn't appear that the letters did
Right.
make it to CAMS, but
Right.
would you say that would be falling at Miss Halloran's door?
I
rather
would,
than
yes.
yours?
Yes.
So for your record, the email from Dr. Killen chasing the records is at AHCH 000234.
Thank you.
So within the letter, you note that you discussed the case with Mr. Morgan, the case manager.
Yes.
You note that AR was open to prevent at the time of the referral. That's the
Yeah,
second
it was closed.
paragraph.
It was closed by the time of the meeting, but yes, it was
Yes.
open. Yes, at the time of the referral.
You note that AR had returned to his school, assaulted a boy, and been arrested for possessing
Yes.
a bladed article.
Yes.
And you also record that the assault was premeditated. You've kindly provided the inquiry with some handwritten notes from the meeting that you took
Yes.
as well. I can bring them up if you need to, but the reference is GMMH 505, and you recorded in those notes that AR wanted to kill the intended victim.
Right.
Do you remember that? We can bring it up if you want to have a
Okay.
quick.
I'm sure that if it's in there, then if you
Right.
want to bring it up, that's fine.
And you also made a note in those notes, actually, if we could bring this up. So it's GMMH 505, page 5. And it's the first bullet point at the top of the page. Pressure needs putting on the PED team, I assume that means paediatric team, due to the level of risk and need for special educational provision. Is that right?
Yes.
So you clearly had a concern following that first meeting that things needed to move quickly, pressure needed to be applied. Is that right?
Yes.
If we could go back to the letter, which is GMMH 506. You explain at the bottom of page 1 that at the time of the meeting, the expected... Could we look at the bottom of page 1 going into the top of page 2, please? Thank you. The expected time before an ASC diagnosis is approximately 2 years.
That's what I was informed, yeah. You then, at the top of page 2, say that liaison with the paediatric team needs to take place to ensure they're aware of the concerns and that they contribute. Is that because the community paediatric team is the service that does ASD diagnoses? I think that's what I would have been informed, yes.
Yes. And then page 2, paragraph 5. You highlight that AR would benefit from psychologically informed interventions to address his high-risk behaviour, taking into consideration his likely diagnosis of ASD. Is that right?
Yes, correct, yeah.
So your view at that time was that it was likely that he did have ASD?
Well, that's what that's what I was informed, yes.
Right. If we could then look at, we know that a second multi-agency meeting took place on the 4th of March 2020.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And I understand from your statement that the purpose of that meeting was to review the progress that had been made since the first consultation.
Yes.
And if we could have the letter you sent following the meeting on screen, it's GMMH 507. And it's a letter to Ms Halloran again, dated the 9th of March 2020.
That's correct, yes.
At paragraph 2, it says that AR has received a 10-month referral order. Anna Kroll, Youth Offending Team, is completing an Asset Plus risk assessment and will be coordinating interventions to address offending behaviour.
Yes.
Could you just assist us with what an Asset Plus risk assessment is in very brief terms?
Well, I think possibly the youth offending team are better off answering that question. I don't want to speak for them, but it's quite a comprehensive look at the historical and current risk behaviours and background information that would be pertinent to understanding the risk and identification of key areas for for their intervention to reduce offending behaviour. Yeah, that would be my summary.
And you note at paragraph 3 that CAMS was not present again at that meeting. You record that the case is closed to them. The inquiry's heard evidence that actually the AR's referral to CAMS wasn't actually formally closed at that time. If that's the case, and if that's right, would you have expected someone from CAMS to attend?
Well, clearly I would have expected somebody to attend because Mr Morgan had said that he was going to attend at this second meeting. So I was expecting that, and I would have expected somebody to attend even if they closed the case, yes. And I was informed that they had closed the case.
I understand. And if we could zoom out and then look at the next page of this letter. It says, I made a comment that risk assessment will be complicated by his likely diagnosis of ASC, and then you go on to list a number of aspects that you say must be taken into account when assessing risk of a young person with ASC. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And then you go on to say in the last paragraph, I'm of the opinion that assessment by our service is not indicated, as until his diagnosis is complete, we would not be able to contribute further to the understanding of risk.
That's correct, yes.
Fourth line from the bottom, you say it was reported the case will step down to early help, and as suggested, this letter can be shared, that the case will now be closed to CAMS, but any professional can contact the service for clarification of this letter, or if review is indicated because of a significant change in circumstances or risk behaviour. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So essentially in this letter you were flagging that one, risk assessment might be more complicated if he did have a diagnosis of ASD.
I'd probably term that the other way round almost, that for risk assessment to be accurate, we need to be certain that diagnosis had been confirmed, I think. I think people suspected that was his presentation, but that would need to be confirmed.
There's no record in this letter of any agreement as such as to who was going to be the lead professional taking over AR's case.
I think, is it possible to go to the top of that letter, this letter again? Is that
of course,
possible?
yes. If we go back to the first page. There's the reference to Anna Kroll on paragraph 2.
Yes, and that's my understanding, that she was going to be taken over as the lead professional in this case.
Okay, so you understood that the youth offending team were going to have responsibility for implementing your recommendations or ensuring that others did?
Yes, I would say that's a fair comment, yeah.
And did you also understand them to be the lead agency with responsibility for conducting a structured risk assessment of AR?
No, not necessarily, no. Are you talking about a structured risk assessment as in the SAVRI?
A structured risk assessment, which could be in the form of a SAVRI.
Right, okay. I think in the comment I was going to say before in terms of the SAVRI is I had lots of training about SAVRI regularly and about in my time, and certainly some caution needs to be considered when there is a diagnosis of ASD, because for obvious not obvious reasons, but for reasons such as, for example, one of the factors might be a kind of empathic response, which young people with ASD, some young people with that diagnosis may find those kind of things more difficult. So they are kind of crucial factors in understanding the risk of violence. But what I was going to say was in my first letter, at the bottom of the first letter, the interventions that I highlighted as being psychologically informed interventions around managing risk, that will have been directly come from my understanding of the SAVRI and what the likely outcome of the SAVRI would have been. They are in themselves kind of informed by knowledge of the SAVRI as specific interventions to help reduce the risk of violence.
Okay, so although a SAVRI hadn't been conducted, are you saying that the recommendations you suggested are what you think would have likely come out of one if
Yes.
it had been at that
Yes.
time?
Yes.
All right. So just to go back to my question, who was it at that time that you understood would be doing a structured professional risk assessment going forward?
Well, I don't know whether, not including the SAVRI, I think the risk assessment would have been the Asset Plus assessment from Anna Kroll, and that she would have been responsible for that.
All right. So we know from this letter that you closed AR to FCAMS at this time. Why did you think that a forensic assessment by FCAMS wasn't appropriate in his case?
Well, I guess I felt that there was a collective understanding of risk. People attending at the meeting, as I said, would have been given opportunity to categorise the risk and comment on risk, and I felt that we were able to kind of make some helpful and sensible recommendations about what would be necessary to manage that risk, and that an ASD diagnosis was the main priority, as that would further give some clarification to the risk, help with an educational health care plan, and also therefore help with accessing specialist education provisions. So I think all of those things would have been seen as a priority above our service doing another assessment, which was likely to have the same outcome as I've said, which would be that a full understanding of whether he met the diagnosis for ASC was of primary importance.
All right. We know from the letters that you were aware that the wait time, well, your understanding was that the wait time for an assessment for ASD was about 2 years at that time. And in the meeting records, we see that there are some concerns raised about how long it was going to take. Did you consider that by closing AR to FCAMS at this time, to wait for an assessment to be done, is that you were essentially leaving him without a proper risk assessment and exposing a risk to members of the public?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that we had done what we set out to do, which was to provide an understanding, a response, as in the remit of FCAMS, a timely response to people's concerns about risk, and a formulated, what I hoped would be a helpful summary of the factors that would contribute to others' risk assessment. As I said, we did not complete risk assessments, but the information that would be helpful in those that are completing risk assessments, and some guidance as to what would be helpful and evidence-based interventions to reduce the risk. That's how I would categorise it, not as you categorised it in just.
Did you give consideration to whether FCAMS should have requested an expedited ASD diagnosis assessment?
I did, and I asked Scott Morgan to do that at the end of the, at the end of the first meeting. I spoke to Scott Morgan and asked him to expedite, kind of the concerns of the professionals to the ASD service.
So your understanding was Mr. Morgan was going to take that forward? Absolutely,
yes. Not necessarily and do that, but he was going to liaise with his team I think, is how it was put.
If we could just bring up your witness statement at page 9, paragraph 26. Apologies, just yes, paragraph 26. You say the only additional actions that could have been taken by me would have been to offer an extended consultation or undertake a forensic assessment, which was not provided by FCAMS at that time unless indicated. We've already covered the forensic assessment part, so let's leave that to one side. But in hindsight, do you think that a period of extended consultation might have been helpful in AR's case?
I think with hindsight, we clearly said that any agency could refer back to us, and we had that was kind of in line with the practice that we had at the time when I was involved in this case, to ask agencies to re-refer, and it was very easy for them to do that. Possibly arguably easier than the first referral, because a telephone conversation with us and a brief summary of the risk factors that had changed, or the risk concerns that had changed at the time, since our involvement, would have been enough for us to reopen the case. So I think that would have been very easy for us to do that, and I would say that was our way of operating. That's what I and others did at the time, and it wasn't my practice or other people's practice at the time to hold the case open beyond what had already been, I would argue, been achieved in terms of the risk management strategies and mitigating factors, strategies that I'd identified in the letters. That it wasn't appropriate for us to keep the case open longer after that second meeting.
And as to the decision to close AR to FCAMS, did you have any objections from other agencies about that decision?
From other agents?
Yes.
No.
If I may just take one moment, please. So was your overall impression, having sent out that second letter, was that essentially the youth offending team were going to do their Asset Plus risk assessment? You understood, I believe, did you understand Miss Halloran to be the lead professional?
No, I think by that time it was...
You felt it?
By the second, after the second letter, after the second meeting, I understood Anna Kroll to be
So the youth offending team?
The youth offending team, yeah.
And then you were expecting agencies to re-refer back to FCAMS if needed for further input.
Yeah, I think there was quite a bit of change at the time of the second meeting from the first meeting, as far as I was concerned. I was informed that specialist education provision could now be expedited. I was informed that he was on a in addition to on the ASC pathway, was also on a pathway towards gaining an EHCP. As I said, Anna Kroll was indicated that she would be doing the Asset Plus assessment and the any interventions that would come out of that. So I saw kind of quite a difference in the risk at the time of the second meeting, being risk management, not the risk changing, but the risk management strategies being in place.
All right. Of course, we now know that despite your invitation for agencies to re-refer back to FCAMS, that never in fact took place, did it?
No.
And I just want to go through quickly a number of events that took place in AR's case after after he was discharged from FCAMS. And if you could just confirm whether you would have expected that to be an event that would have prompted a re-referral to FCAMS, that would be very helpful.
Sure.
So firstly, AR being diagnosed with ASD in February 2021.
I think we'd have to kind of that would have to have been considered with what the main factors of that diagnosis, what the nuances of that diagnosis were highlighting, as to whether or not that had implications for our understanding of risk. If that was the only risk factor, or the only consideration, I think we would have to know a bit more than just he's received a diagnosis. I think we'd have to understand what the nuances of that diagnosis were.
All right. And then for all the events I'm going to list after, they all came after the diagnosis. Okay. So if you can bear in mind, it would be diagnosis plus
okay.
the events.
Yeah.
So firstly, 2 further referrals to Prevent in February 21 and April 21.
Yeah, I presume that was because of additional concerns that were appropriate for the referral to Prevent. So absolutely, yes, I think that would be something that the team would consider as appropriate for a re-referral to FCAMS.
Incidents in November 2021 of violent and volatile behaviour and verbal threats at home, including pouring milk over his father.
Yeah, I think quite possibly. I mean, obviously I need to know a little bit more about that, what those violent incidents were. But yes, I would think that was again something we would certainly consider as being a potential re-referral criteria. Yes, as meeting that criteria.
All right. An incident in March 22 where AR was found on a bus, having gone missing from home in possession of a knife. And when the police dealt with him, he made remarks about wanting to stab people and either having made poison or thinking about making poison.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
There were other incidents, but I'm not going to go through all of them. But there was also a general trend, certainly towards later stages, of an ongoing lack of engagement with CAMS treatment and concerns about him taking his medication reliably.
Yes, absolutely. I would say all of those things. Definitely.
And what about if there was a period of being isolated in the house, and so this is September 2023, not taking medication, increasing time on computers, lack of washing, not attending school?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think if that was said in the context of he's also received an ASC diagnosis, absolutely, that would.
All right. And if you had that re-referral, what would you have done with it?
I think, as I said before, it would have been very easy for somebody to contact us. We would have perhaps asked them just to formalise that by dropping us a letter, just to identifying what had happened in the interim period. And then discussion would take place as to who the case would be allocated to. But given that it had been, if you like, it had been allocated to me previously, I think some serious consideration would be given to whether or not it should be reallocated to me, as I would have that continuity within the team. And again, we would be discussing with whoever made that referral, the kind of best way forward. It would often probably be in the context initially of another professionals meeting and going through the process again, and then consideration as to whether, there now was a need for us to move that forward and go to a formal face-to-face assessment.
And just generally, at the time of your involvement with AR, did FCAMS routinely monitor its referrals where you've closed a case and said that they should be re-referred if XYZ happens, or if there are these particular concerns, or did you just wait for someone to re-refer back?
I don't think there was well, from memory, it may be better to ask managers that come after me, but I don't think that was routinely done at the time of my involvement. There wasn't routine. I think you're saying, did we check up on the recommendations that we made in each case? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes, I'm saying if you said like here, if there's an ASD diagnosis or changes in presentation, significant changes, you want people to refer back
Yes.
to you. Did you sit down and think, oh, it's been a year, no one said anything, I should check in, or was it pretty much closed?
No, we wouldn't have done that. No, we wouldn't have done that.
All right. You've helpfully provided some reflections in your statement, which are at paragraphs, mostly at paragraphs 20, 22 and 26. Won't take you to those now, but they'll be forming part of your evidence. And just finally, I'm asked to ask you whether you felt that resourcing issues within FCAMS affected the service that you were able to deliver.
I guess that sort of any clinician would say that you could always have additional resources, but I don't remember there being any. I don't remember there being any, for example, noticeable vacancies or anything of that sort. If that's what in staffing, if that's what you meant by that, if that answers that question.
Thank you. And just for completeness, the Asset Plus risk assessment, would just give you, Sir Chair, the note for your records. It's LCC 000447. And that was conducted in April 2020, and we'll be hearing evidence about that in due course.
Grand.
Thank you. I'll just look to my left. Thank you. I think Mr. Bowen Casey.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I ask questions on behalf of the bereaved families. I've got some general questions, sir, and I've also got specific permission in relation to one of the conduct disorder points from the Rule 10. Do you know who Alexandra Chisnell is?
Yes, I do, yes.
Okay, who is she?
She was an administrator with our service at the time.
Right. And you work closely with her?
Yes.
Yeah. You CC'd her on documents, on
I wouldn't.
certain notes and letters?
No, I wouldn't. Not from a clinical perspective. She would have perhaps been sending those letters out once they were. You know, she was the administrator that perhaps would have sent the letters out.
Could we have MERP 000178? If we start at page 11, please, on the screen. And we see there at the top, there's a reference to Alexandra Chisnell. I think you've been taken to some of these documents. Could you just identify what this document is? And when you've had a look at that, just if you go to page 12, please. You see that referral reason conduct disorder. You can see the referral closed 11th of March at the top again. Who received? Reference again to Chisnell. We got the timing. And then page 15 of the document. Again, ARFCAM's referral form PDF, document type referral forms, document date 13th. So this is the date that Halloran makes the reference to you. Again, Alexandra Chisnell, again time recorded. And then, could you look at page 24, please? Yeah, 24. Again, this is AR's case from John Hicklin, again, later in the day, 38 minutes past 3. Referral of AR to FCAMS, CC'd to Alexandra Chisnell. And you're writing to Stephanie Halloran here. Thank you for your recent referral. Case allocated to me. As you may be aware, we asked referrers to arrange a meeting, etc. We've heard about that with when you were asked questions by CTI. Better understanding of the risk, etc. And then you set up the meeting. Okay. Now, you've been told that Stephanie Halloran, I think paragraph 52 of her witness statement, has said, I didn't mention conduct disorder. The only person who could possibly have brought that in, and as we see from all of these documents, is you.
It certainly isn't me.
It isn't you?
No.
Well, how does it get in?
I don't know. I've not seen that document that was there previously. These are...
Your names are over it.
It is here, yes.
Yeah.
And on the previous document that you...
Chisnell's name's all over it.
Yeah. I guess that's an administrative document that's done...
It's not an error.
I didn't say error. I said administrative
Let the witness
Oh,
finish his answer, Mr. Byrne.
Okay.
I said it was I thought it was an administrative document that was looked like it must be a document that's completed by admin staff on completion of the case.
We have to assume that the reference to conduct disorder is a contemporaneous entry on the 13th of December.
I can't make a further comment about it. I don't know where that comment has come, where conduct disorder has come from.
I'm not trying to trap you.
No, I just don't know.
I'm just slightly surprised that it calls for the best explanation that we can get for who brought in a clinical reference to something that might be suspected in relation to AR.
Okay.
Who are the likely candidates who could have brought it into your referral documentation?
I've got to be honest. I don't know. The first document that you asked to be brought up, that's not a document that I use. I presumed that was an admin kind of document that was done either at opening of the case or closing of the case. If you want me to speculate, I wonder whether there was some kind of drop-down options of kind of the reason why somebody would be referred. I don't know what that was and why conduct disorder was put there, but it's not...
You mean a drop-down menu which is clicked by accident?
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
All right. Okay. Well, I can't take it any further. All right. Okay. Could you just bring up page 4 again? There's a code on that saying OV1 on page 4 of 00178. Do you know what that code is? It looks like CCG?
I think clinical care group would be CCG. I would guess.
Nothing to do with conduct disorders. A specific code for a specific problem.
Again, I'm really, really sorry, but I don't know the answer to that question. I'd normally, in my working experience, CCG standard for clinical care group. That was a shorthand for that. But I don't. In this situation, I don't know what it stands for.
Okay, just moving on. It was suggested that you were reactive in the way you dealt with the referral. I have to suggest that rather than being reactive, you were, and I don't mean this rudely in any way, you were a bit dismissive.
Of the referral?
you're a bit dismissive because I'm afraid I don't have it at my fingertips. I think it's in one of the, I think it's in the minute from memory of the meeting on either the 20th or the 21st. You explained to the deputy head of Acorns, Joanna Hodson, that she had to appreciate that you dealt with really heavy cases. And is there a danger that you were rather underestimating the risk that was inherent in the background facts to AR's conduct?
I think I would repeat the question I gave previously, that my letters in no way at all underestimate the risk or don't, in fact, highlight the risk that professionals highlighted to me at the time of take into consideration absolutely everything. And I think the summary of professional concerns is very clear in that letter. No, I wouldn't.
Sorry,
agree.
I'm deaf, I'm afraid. So
that's okay.
I have to fiddle with the kit.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right,
Did you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
If I press the headphones. Okay, right. Sorry. Could you say that again?
I would say that my letters entirely take on board the risk as highlighted by professionals at that meeting and risk management strategies, as I've clearly stated, and in no way at all did I underestimate the risk.
But did the meeting get a little heated with Hodson? Because you had a bit of a dust up with her.
Recall the meeting. I mean, meetings can get heated. I don't recall the meeting getting heated. I think some discussion and heated discussion is sometimes helpful, but I don't recall that being any heated discussion or any overt falling out or anything of that sort. I think everybody around the table agreed about the risk and the need for risk and mitigating strategies.
So there's nothing between us on the seriousness of the risk because of the homicidal ideation in October, going equipped to murder on the 11th of December. You knew all of that.
Yes.
You weren't light-hearted, you weren't dismissive, you thought it should be dealt with in a different way. That's your case.
Well, yes, I think that would be. I think that's a fair summary. I think I would just also repeat that, there was no indication that this at the time that AR was likely to be receiving anything other than a community. It was all about risk management in the community. Despite.
Sorry.
Yes.
Two things, Mr. Byrne. First of all, he doesn't have a case. Secondly,
I withdraw that.
This is reasonably repetitive of material we've already been.
If it's not helpful, okay. Right. Can I just move on then to the specific point and I'll deal with it quickly. It's been accepted, I think, that you were pretty confident that he had all of the traits of autism. So no remorse, fixation on bullying, lack of empathy, as examples.
I was pretty certain that the professionals in the group were confident that all the professionals that I met that had met him and met his family were confident that he would likely meet a diagnosis. Yeah. Yes.
So the assessment for ASD was confirmatory rather than something that there was a real doubt about.
To some extent, but I think it was important that what in particular aspects of that diagnosis would have contributed to further understanding of the risk. So I don't think it's per se about a diagnosis to say somebody's got something. It's about how that impacts on their behaviour, their thinking, and the whole presentation. That can be very unique to each individual case.
Okay. And just on conduct disorders, how much do you have much experience of children with conduct disorders?
Well, I suppose arguably a significant proportion of young people within the criminal justice system and with you know, kind of that would be referred to a service like ours may well meet some criteria for conduct disorder. Yes.
And would you agree that if it's only a conduct disorder, then the likelihood would have been a discharge from CAMS and a concentration on social care and behaviour management?
I guess that CAMS themselves may be better able to answer that question than me, but I think that might well have met some of my experience in the past, yes.
All right, but that wouldn't be the case, would it, if it was comorbid with something else? Here, significant autism.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with
Right.
what you're saying there.
So if you have, because this is Dr. Irani's view, it's a 3.3.1.5 of the report. This is the specific point I've been asked to, or given permission to look at. So she says, if it's comorbid, then that's pretty significant with a conduct disorder.
Yes,
assuming one is.
I can understand that.
So that would then not involve a falling away of support from CAMS or FCAMS. You're then very much in the driving seat, because you need to assess forensically.
I think that's possibly taking that second step is a bit of a when it comes to the involvement of FCAMS. I think that's taking a little bit further than I would like to agree with this statement. I think I agreed with you up until you talked about the FCAMS involvement there. I think it is the comorbidity that you're talking about is a very important factor. I agree with you. I would comment that the interventions that I highlighted in terms of the Savary in the first letter would also be interventions that would be probably indicated for somebody who was to receive a conduct disorder as well. I don't think that the inappropriate interventions from a psychological perspective as well.
Okay, and would you? I'm almost there, sir. So, with delay, because of course we did have delay here for reasons that have been touched on already, toxic behaviour becomes more entrenched, and early intervention is essential.
I think that's a fair point. Yes.
Okay.
I think your time is up, Mr. Byrne.
Yeah, and I've run out of prompt. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just for completeness, Mr. Moss has very helpfully informed me that it appears that the 01V code that the witness was just asked about is a organisational code within the NHS for data security purposes. It doesn't appear to be anything linked to a referral reason, but of course Alder Hay will be able to correct that if we're mistaken.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for your assistance. You're now free to go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May we have a short break?
10 minutes?
Thank you.
I'll sit again at past.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Please have a seat.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Mr. Moss.
Thanks, sir. Just start by giving us your full name, if you would.
My name's Amanda Jane Brown.
Thank you. And if we could have on screen, please, GMMH 4015. Have a copy of your statement that you provided to the inquiry dated the 27th of August 2025. Are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are true. Just to add, the opening statement suggests that during the whole of the relevant period that I've contributed and held a senior leadership role. I have held a senior leadership role during that period, but not necessarily directly for the CAMS division, which included FCAMS. I've been part of the FCAMS and the CAMS division of Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust since September 2023.
Thank you. We can see from the face that it's a corporate statement that's jointly authored with your colleague, Dr. Imran, yes?
Yes, correct.
We've made arrangements, should it be required, for Dr. Imran to attend later. She wasn't available today, and we're grateful for you providing evidence. If at any stage during my questioning we get into areas that are overly clinical and you feel uncomfortable answering, please just say so, and we can then pick them up with your colleague later on.
Thank you.
But please give us the assistance that you can. So just briefly by way of biography, you've touched on this a little bit, but you explain in paragraph 3, page 2 of your statement, you're the head of operations for the CAMS division within the Greater Manchester Health NHS Foundation Trust. Is that correct?
Yes.
In terms of your own background, you qualified as a specialist child and adolescent social worker in 1995.
Correct.
And you've specialised in child and adolescent mental health from 2004 onwards.
Correct.
And the head of operations role, I think, is something you've carried for 7 years, with that caveat about the responsibility for the FCAMs that you've indicated.
And adult services, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And the forensic child and adolescent mental health services Northwest, the FCAMs that we're speaking of, I think sit within the CAMS division for which you're head of operations.
Correct.
Thank you. Can I turn against that background then to the role and remit of FCAMs? And we've heard something about this from our previous witness. In terms of the advice and consultation, the first limb of the services that are provided, is there anything that you wanted to add to the working level description that Mr. Hickling gave of that?
No, I would say that most recently and prior to this incident, the standard operating procedures and the systems and processes have changed within the FCAMS arena. That was undertaken when I came into role, not just within FCAMS, but for the whole of the CAMS division and every service within there. So there have been some significant changes. So,
right. So I'm going to ask you to stick with how things were at the time,
okay,
in late 2019 and 2020. But when we come to the end of your evidence, you can add in the significance of any changes.
Thank you.
So in terms of how Mr. Hickling was describing the advice and consultation stages, would you broadly agree that what he said was accurate and is a good indication? Thank you. The second limb, the ability to give direct assessments. What can you assist us with in the circumstances in which FCAMs would have thought it appropriate to do a direct assessment rather than only giving advice and consultation to the professionals who are already involved?
It's my professional opinion that this would have been an MDT discussion back with the FCAMS team, and a decision would have been made whether it was indicated and appropriate to undertake a forensic assessment, whatever that might be. In this case, the Savary has been mentioned throughout.
Thank you. But should we understand that that would only arise if at the first stage, the advice and consultation limb, there was a sense by the FCAMS nurse or the FCAMS worker that it wasn't possible to give an appropriate formulation of the mental health issue that was in play, or perhaps alternatively that it was so high on the seriousness scale that an assessment might be needed from FCAMS?
Sorry, could you repeat the actual question?
Yeah. I'm really asking, you say, well, it would be a multidisciplinary panel. How would it get to the multidisciplinary panel? In what circumstances would the frontline FCAMS workers say, well, actually, there's a problem here, and we might need a direct assessment?
It's general that there is an MDT discussion within the FCAMS service on a weekly basis and on an ad hoc basis where there may be some contention within cases or there's complexity within cases that need a wider discussion and leading to a variety of further risk assessments.
All right. So the issues that would give rise to FCAMS offering a direct assessment to the person referred in would be those sort of complexities or contentiousness identified in an FCAM's multidisciplinary discussion?
Built on from the consultation that's been offered to the local system.
All right. And would all cases be considered at the weekly multidisciplinary discussion, or would somebody in Mr. Hicklin's position have to put it forward for discussion, saying this is potentially contentious or complex?
I'm unclear. That would have to be picked up with Dr. Imran.
Thank you. The intervention with the young person's professional network, the third limb, Mr. Hicklin indicated, I think, some caution about the way that it had been described in your joint statement. If we could have your statement, page 4, please. That wording at the top of the page. And in essence, I think he was saying that reflects the current way that FCAMs might work to intervene, with an emphasis on supporting the practitioners, the professionals who are already involved. But I think he was indicating at his time it might have been a bit more direct, that FCAMs might be involved in some direct intervention with the person who'd been referred.
In terms of direct intervention, it wouldn't be treatment as such. It would have been an assessment, period of an assessment and extended assessment.
So a time-limited period of assessment, but would some of that be face-to-face with the patient, or would that be assessment of what the other professionals were doing?
Both, potentially.
Thank you. So far as I'm going to come on to aspects of risk in a number of places, but if we could just look at paragraphs 22 to 24 of your statement, please. Page 9. I'll come back to this, but you say that when FCAM's paragraph 22, page 9, please. Could that just be blown up nice and large, please? Paragraph 22. When FCAM accepts a referral for a young person, the responsibility for holding and maintaining the risk assessment remains with the referrer or lead coordinating professional. I'm asked to explore this with you. Would you accept that FCAMS, given its experience, is the primary body with the most relevant expertise when assessing the risk of violence of young adults, where it may arise from a mental health condition?
It needs to be undertaken in partnership with the system, and the system being health, education, social care. Of course, the FCAMS team have forensic expertise in undertaking specialist assessments that could also add to risk profiles.
And that forensic expertise, is that something over and above what, in inverted commas, standard CAMS staff would have in assessing risk?
Generally, yes.
At this time, 2019-2020, was the FCAM service in this region commissioned to provide any direct specialist services for individuals with AR's sort of risk profile?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question again?
Yeah. Was the FCAM service in this region commissioned to provide any direct specialist services for individuals with AR's sort of risk profile?
Direct specialist services to AR or?
To AR or somebody with AR's sort of risk profile?
Yes. Assessment.
Okay, so we've got the assessment, but in terms of actual interventions, would there have been any potential for therapeutic services, even for inpatient care, matters of that kind?
They could make some recommendations, but it is very unlikely because of the way that the service has been commissioned and resourced that treatment and therapy would be provided by the team. There would be an expectation that that would generally be undertaken by the wider system and the services in the locality,
Yeah.
which there are few and far between. There is a gap.
So very unlikely that that would be provided by FCAMS. You'd have to then make recommendations for the services offered by others.
Yes.
And even if AR had been diagnosed with a conduct disorder, would the same apply? That wouldn't make a change to the likelihood that there was any direct treatment that could be provided by FCAMS.
During this time period, the FCAMS service would not have provided ASC diagnosis, but they do now. They would not have delivered direct intervention and therapeutic treatments. There would be an expectation if there was a conduct disorder that within the local system there would be services to support AR and or his parents.
Right. Can you try to be concrete in relation to this? Which services provided by which agencies? Give us some examples.
So, for example, parenting support generally is provided by early help and social care, education, mental health support teams. Direct provision of support to AR could have been provided if there was a need for treatment directly from the OT service and or CAMS service, generally.
Thank you. And the gap that you mentioned a moment ago in the provision at the time, you think is what? Can you just define it for us?
So once somebody undertakes very specific assessment and treatment, such as the Savary or AIM assessment, for example, but this is not relevant in this case, you would need somebody who has got a repertoire of therapeutic skills to be able to deliver the treatment after. Therapy staff who hold those skills are few and far between across the system.
Thank you. Changing topic now, could we just look at the process once somebody has been referred in and is open to FCAMS? Paragraph 14 of your statement, please, at page 7. That can be enlarged, please, Sarah. FCAMS requires the young person to be open to a lead coordinating professional for the duration of the service's involvement. You go on to explain that if the coordinating professional discharges the young person and no other service takes over coordinating responsibility, FCAMS will escalate the concern within the local system at a senior level. So should we take it from that that FCAMS would never itself see itself as the lead coordinating professional?
Correct.
It's always in a supporting role.
Yes. It's a collaborative.
Thank you. And consistent with that, page 4 of your statement, with apologies for jumping around, but a linked point. Paragraph 5. During FCAM's involvement with a young person, the referrer or other lead professional remains the responsible case coordinator, yes?
Yes.
So from the FCAM's point of view, there would always have to be at least one other professional agency involved. Do you agree?
Correct.
And FCAMS would never see itself as the lead agency. The person who would be the lead agency would be the person who referred to FCAMS or another lead professional, presumably if they are allocated the role of lead professional.
Correct. And generally born out of recommendations that have been made through consultation or assessment.
At a general level, would you agree that in AR's case, what one doesn't see on the documents is a clear statement of who the lead agency was at each time?
During this period of time, I would agree, yes.
And do we take it from that that's changed?
It has changed.
And would you agree, in general terms, that the risks of that are obvious because cases could fall between the cracks?
Absolutely.
And in relation to example to the important aspects for this inquiry of a structured risk assessment, would you agree that there's a risk of who is meant to be doing the structured risk assessment might fall between the cracks if it wasn't clear who the lead agency was?
A structured risk assessment is a little different than a collective risk assessment. Within FCAMs and with cases of this nature, I would expect, given the recent research and best practice, that there would absolutely be a risk share amongst the system providers, so that whilst there will be a lead, the risk is shared amongst the whole of the community system.
Yes, but somebody has to do the structured risk assessment.
The structured risk assessments are generally undertaken, because the structured risk assessments are specialist forensic assessments.
Yes.
They're undertaken by FCAMs alongside and in support of the information that's available from the rest of the partners in the system.
And at a general level, do you think from the records that that was done in AR's case?
No. Not to the standard that we would expect.
Thank you. In general terms, the closure of a referral to FCAMs would be taken in what circumstances?
When there would be no further action required from an FCAMS department, that there is assurance that recommendations are being carried out, there is a lead professional actively involved, and that the system are working really closely together to ensure that identified needs are met.
So it would be appropriate, depending upon the individual circumstances, for FCAMs to close the referral to it as an agency, not when the person has been discharged from care and services altogether, but when the FCAM's role has been dealt with and other agencies are now satisfactorily taking the case forward.
Correct.
So far as forensic assessments by FCAMs are concerned, was there at the time any internal guidance on when that was appropriate to take place? You've said that it would be considered by the MDT, but was there any guidance on that, on which cases were appropriate for it?
The standard operating procedure when I arrived in 2023 was very loose, and that was refreshed and reviewed and approved at our SLT governance senior meeting in February 2024. It was felt that the standard operating procedure needed tightening up. This was before this incident occurred. So in answer to your question, there was no specific evidence of detail when somebody would move from consultation to assessment. There was no standard set at that point.
Again, I suppose one can't generalise as to the form that the forensic assessment might take. But if we could look at paragraph 17 of your statement at page 7, please. If that can be enlarged, please, Sarah. you helpfully give us some examples of the skills that could be called upon. So specialist LD in mental health nursing, psychological, psychiatric, speaking language, neurodevelopmental assessments. It's quite a multidisciplinary range. So you could choose, or the MDT could choose, a appropriate clinician or a mixture of appropriate clinicians to do that sort of forensic assessment with quite a lot of specialities covered.
Or a couple of professionals really to complement the assessments that were being undertaken if there were gaps already within the system and the knowledge within the system.
Thank you.
I think it is noteworthy to say there's been investment into the service, which has meant that the service now has a speech and language therapist and a specialist LD nurse.
Yeah. And at the time, we appreciate from your statement that this has changed, whereas Mr. Hicklin was indicating, my paraphrase, but the importance of an autism diagnosis being made. At the time, FCAMS didn't have the capacity to see to those autism assessments being done themselves.
Correct.
And that is one area that has changed.
It has changed. It changed in March 2024.
Thank you. And if the NOW system, the post-March 24 system, had been in place at the time, with the sort of set of circumstances that you can see for AR from your knowledge of the papers in late 2019, early 2020, would the FCAMS commissioned autism assessment have been put in place?
Yes.
So I want to go back now to the question that we touched upon a little bit of risk assessments. Can we go back to your paragraph 22, please? So that's the one starting at page 9. Can you help us just to understand now in a little bit more detail the point that you raised that the structured risk assessment would involve FCAMS, but that would be done in partnership with others. Can you just explain how that actually works on the ground?
I can summarise that. You may be better asking Dr. Imran
Yes.
For the micro details surrounding that. But generally, a SAVRI, for example, is made up of very different components, looking at history, current risks, background, incidents in detail, and lots of other professionals obviously provide information to ensure that that is really comprehensive so that there can be a formulation and scoring system which would then give outcomes in terms of a risk score and also opportunity for treatment.
Right. So you're going to have to pull the information in from different sources to inform the risk scoring.
Yeah, including family and AR,
Yeah.
if possible.
And forgive me for descending to this, and again, we have to pick this up with Dr. Imran and let us know. But at some stage, somebody has to sit down with the scoring structure and assess that information to come up with the risk scores. Is that person going to be a nurse from FCAMS or another professional from FCAMS, or is it going to be somebody from one of the other agencies? For example, here, the CAMS practitioners.
It's likely to be the FCAM service that does that.
So when you say, when FCAMS accepts a referral for a young person, the responsibility for holding and maintaining the risk assessment remains with the referrer or lead coordinating professional, does that need to be read with the important caveat that in appropriate cases, FCAMS would go alongside the other agency and actively help score on a standardized type of risk assessment? Yes?
Yes. And it wouldn't be used in isolation. You just wouldn't use the SAVRI. You'd use lots of other risk assessments that are undertaken by the individual services.
I follow. And you candidly said straight away when I asked you whether that had happened satisfactorily in AR's case that you thought that it hadn't. Can you just expand on that answer and explain what you think should have been done that wasn't?
It's my professional opinion, and I think that that needs to be with a caveat that I've not been in clinical practice for a period of time. I have limited experience of forensic CAMs, although I was able and trained to do some forensic risk assessments, that a SAVRI could have been indicated earlier in this case and escalation could have been indicated earlier in the case, particularly with the CAM service sometimes not coming to the table during these very vital and important meetings, professional meetings and consultations.
So let's break that down. A SAVRI could have been indicated earlier in this case. What does that mean in practical terms? Who should have been indicating that a SAVRI would be an appropriate risk score?
The FCAM service.
So the FCAM service here, you would think, in your professional opinion, should have flagged up the desirability of doing that sort of standardised risk assessment?
Yeah, because of the complexity and the high risk evident within this case.
I follow. So that's the could have been indicated earlier. And then you said particularly with the CAMS service sometimes not coming to the table during these very vital and important professional meetings and consultations. Did you mean by that CAMS not having come to the 2 meetings in 2020, that it would have been appropriate for FCAMS to flag to CAMS the desirability of doing a SAVRI and really try to bring them more to the table?
Yes.
And was there more to it than that, or have I satisfactorily summarised what you think should have happened?
I think you've summarised it quite well. There needed to have been an escalation to ensure that, with CAMS not coming to the table at the time, that there was a real push to ensure that they absolutely joined and contributed. There may have been vital information that they had during that period that would have been missing from the risk assessment, and they could have contributed greatly.
Of course, not a question directed at any personal responsibility on your part at all. But would you agree that what seems to have happened instead is that Mr. Hicklin, in the March letter, has given some indications of the potential risk complications that could arise because of autism, so sort of factors that might be coming out of a SAVRI assessment. But in a letter that was, on the face of it, first of all, only sent to Ms. Halloran.
Correct.
And that was also, in some senses, a cautious document because it wasn't giving a full SAVRI assessment. It was saying these could be the sort of issues in play, but we can't contribute further without knowing the diagnosis.
Correct.
And meanwhile, CAMS, who it seems probably didn't have the skills to do the SAVRI type of standardised risk assessment, fell back on their own risk assessment tool. Yes? Have you seen some of the CAMS risk assessments?
I haven't seen Alder Hayes risk assessment, but I would imagine that it's not dissimilar to what is used across Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust.
Yeah. So not really having a standardised method of assessing the risk, and CAMS have accepted that they were neither as structured nor as detailed nor as frequent as they should have been. And so that did here on the risk assessment, would you agree, lead to, again, the proper standardised type of risk assessment falling between the cracks, here falling between the cracks of FCAMS and CAMS principally?
Yes, there seems vital information missing.
in terms of the complexity of different agencies thinking that others were in the lead, we don't perhaps need to have it up on screen, but Steffrey Halloran, so for your reference, Merck, MERC 4026, paragraph 61, she indicates that so far as her organisation, the CJYS were concerned, sometimes thought of as the yachts, she says, I was advised that we were not best placed to complete a SAVRI, and this could be considered by CAMS or FCAMS. And again, that all points, doesn't it, to different agencies thinking that other agencies were in the lead for doing the risk assessment. Yes?
Well, that element of a risk assessment,
Yeah.
yes.
Can we pause on how matters were at the time? And can I invite you just to give a summary for the learned chair of the ways in which you think that is now different, so that there's less risk of the same thing happening?
Thank you. The recommendations that and changes that have been made to Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust FCAM service so far have been there have been an LD specialist nurse. There is an autism pathway and assessment.
I'm going to stop you. I'm so sorry. I think you're reading from a note, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But could you please, I'll come back to wider changes, but can you focus on this issue? Because I'm particularly concerned that you should be able to explain to the chair in terms of risk assessments in this type of situation, so not wider changes, but why would you be confident now that there wouldn't be this failure whereby the SAVRI type of risk assessment isn't done by FCAMS, CAMS are left to do their own type of risk assessment. Meanwhile, the yacht team think that it's either CAMS or FCAMS who are doing it, but nobody in fact actually does it.
Okay, so there are a variety of things that have changed in relation to the risk assessments. Within the standard operating procedure, which has been approved and reviewed since this incident, there is very clear mechanisms to move from consultation to specialist forensic assessment outlined within that standard operating procedure. There is also, as part of that standard operating procedure, the opportunity for audit to ensure that recommendations where they have been made to the wider system are audited across a system on a regular basis via a random snapshot twice a year. There are also multidisciplinary teams that discuss the potential for discharge, and supervision is far more robust than previous.
Thank you. I think what I'm going to do, Ms. Brown, we may have Dr. Imran along, but I might ask you to take away that question more specifically about focusing down on ensuring that appropriate, more advanced type of risk assessments and who's responsible for them are now carried out. Yesterday, when Dr. Killen gave evidence on behalf of CAMS, and I put to her the substance of the corporate statement that you and Dr. Imran have provided, paraphrasing paragraph 22, she indicated that they, CAMS, would defer to the risk assessment by FCAMS, and they should do a full risk assessment. And when I put to her the essence of paragraph 22, that the responsibility for holding and maintaining the risk assessment remained with the lead agency, she said that that wasn't quite how she understood it, and she thought that there was still a lack of clarity around this, and that she would like to see greater clarity in commissioning as well. So that evidence tends to suggest, even now, from a very experienced clinical lead a lack of clarity about where the divisions of responsibility lie for this type of risk assessment. Is that something you could take away and provide us with an update note on the current state of play on understanding who bears what responsibility for risk assessments in this type of situation?
Yeah.
Thank you. Looking then at AR's engagement with the FCAMS service, much of this has been addressed by Mr. Hicklin. Could I ask this? He wasn't able to attend the strategy meeting on the 17th of December. What would the expectation be in that case? One appreciates it was at relatively short notice. Is that just an operational risk that sometimes you can't field somebody, or would FCAMS have expected to have sent somebody to attend in Mr. Hicklin's place?
There would be an expectation that there would be attendance. I think it needs to be borne in mind that the FCAM services are small services. There are just 12 members of staff within that service. They cover a very wide area. But we do also now have a safeguarding lead that could have attended a strategy meeting on behalf of FCAMS to feed back some of that information.
Thank you. In terms of the recommendations that Mr. Hicklin made in his 2 letters, other than the aspect of risk assessment, which I've touched upon already, what is your observation on the type of advice and recommendations that he was giving in those 2 letters?
We've moved to more of a smart action recommendation and being very clear about what needs to happen, why it needs to happen, who are we keeping safe by undertaking a piece of work, and who is responsible, and potential timelines for work for completion, who will be the lead professional to undertake and ensure that this is monitored. It feels a lot more structured in terms of the correspondence that is forwarded out. There's also a greater emphasis and assurance surrounding who receives a copy of the recommendations, either from consultation or assessment.
Yes, because would you agree that one downside of the letters is that being addressed only to the person who had referred into FCAMS when there were quite a few agencies involved, and relying on that other agency to copy it round was not ideal?
Not ideal.
You've indicated that, that now there would be an emphasis on the structure so that it was smart, compliant, so measurable, time limited, and so on. And one understands that. But looking at the substance of the recommendations that Mr. Hicklin made, were they generally within the sort of standard that you would expect, albeit that they could have been structured and headed better?
Yes.
And appropriate for FCAM's type of advice?
Yes.
You will have heard my friend Ms. Wakeman asking Mr. Hicklin himself about the 21st of January meeting notes, obviously not his note. Could we just have that back on screen? It's LCC 4020. And could we have enlarged, please, Sarah, the very last paragraph on the first page? So Mr. Hicklin then turned to Ms. Hodson, the deputy head, and said, I've been thinking about what you said before. I don't have a crystal ball. None of us have. We can't say whether he's likely to offend again. There are kids who have carried out serious offences. They still have a right to an education. Ms. Hodson replied that might be so, but she wasn't prepared to explain to a parent why a child at our school has been seriously injured. Now, in fairness to Mr. Hicklin, he was keen to explain that the context to this was that at this stage, AR had been permanently excluded from his old school and was not yet attending his new school, the referral unit, while the risk was being looked at. So at that stage, he was out of education, and it's not his note of this. But against that background, do you have any observation on an indication that he may have said something to the effect of, I don't have a crystal ball, none of us have, we can't say whether he's likely to offend again?
I wasn't in the meeting. I understand that this is a note. This is not how I would expect one of our professionals within FCAMS to communicate with the wider system. It doesn't fit the organisation's values and standards expectations.
And on page 2, in the middle of the page, we'll just go over. It's the very middle paragraph, Sarah. You'd have brought it up before. It's the one beginning John H. And again, John H. repeated that there were no crystal balls and that he would offer a £5 bet to anyone who could say what was going to happen next. He said that AR clearly needed some sort of specialist provision with ongoing therapy and social stories. But unfortunately, you've been left holding the baby. Even if one makes allowance for this being a note, not verbatim, and for the context that Mr. Hicklin may have been appropriately seeking a re-entry into education and pressing the need for specialist provision, and even in the absence of AR or his parents, would you expect to see reference to offering a bet of £5 as to what could happen next?
No.
We know that after the second meeting and the letter that followed from Mr. Hicklin, AR was discharged from FCAM's services, or FCAM's caseload. In relation to that, can you just give us your assessment of whether that was appropriate or whether there was a different course open at that stage?
My own professional opinion is that a professionals meeting should have been called to ensure that that was a safe discharge. There were very key players who were missing from the meeting, including CAMS, and it wasn't very clear who was going to take on the roles and responsibilities outlined within the recommendations.
Thank you. So if we see your paragraph 21 at page 9, please. Page 9 of the statement, GMMH 4015. Thank you very much. And that's the essence, isn't it, of what you're seeking to communicate there, the benefit of delaying discharge, a further multi-agency professional meeting. First of all, they could have got CAMS along to that, and the purpose on the face of the FCAM understanding would have been to in part to try to encourage CAMS to keep the case open, yes?
Yes.
Because there was a FCAM's understanding that it was going to be closed. But in any event, I think you indicate also to give clarity around who was going to take forward the recommendations, yes?
Yes.
And also a formal designation of which the lead agency was going to be.
Yes.
You are, of course, both more experienced and more senior, and you are also looking at this now with the knowledge of current practice that has improved and your knowledge from reading the papers. Can you assist us to try to gradate this a little bit? Do you think that the closure to FCAMS was a poor professional decision at the time with what was known? Or do you think that it's more a case that that was understandable at the time, but now there would be a different approach?
The latter.
So you wouldn't be saying that the decision to close it at the time was outside of reasonable professional practice for FCAMs at that time.
At that time. However, I do still maintain that a Savary should have been undertaken.
Well, I was going to come on to that, and you correctly predicted my next question, but what you would say is that the way in which the Savary was dealt with or not dealt with was poor practice.
Yes.
Thank you. AR having been discharged from FCAM's involvement, Mr. Hicklin was asked about this, but at the time that the formal diagnosis of autism was made at a meeting in December 2020 and communicated on across January and February 2021, would that have been an appropriate time to re-refer AR to FCAMs?
Yes, I feel it's a missed opportunity, particularly because assessment for ASC doesn't only give a diagnosis, it gives lots of information about how somebody functions.
Thank you. And I don't need to go through them all, but after the diagnosis of autism, there's a series of further events. So there were more prevent referrals. There was attendance by the police at his home for incidents involving a level of violence, some to property, some to parents, and there was the bus incident in March 22. Again, I'm not going to list them all, but certainly with those events on top of the autism diagnosis, that it would have been appropriate to refer back into FCAMs.
Absolutely.
And would you go so far as to say it's not just appropriate, but that he should have been referred
Yes.
back to FCAMs?
By all system partners, because that list involves lots of agencies from health, social care, the police,
Yeah.
education.
So that would be, as it were, the push of referrals coming back to FCAMs.
Yes.
What about any pull from FCAMs?
At the
Was
time,
there, forgive me, was there any system at the time to monitor post-closure or to monitor, there was a sort of quasi-recommendation from Mr. Hicklin, if things change or if you get the diagnosis, come back to us. Was there any post-closure monitoring?
no, not at the time. That has subsequently changed
And how does that work now?
through the audit system that is now in place within the service. And by much more robust discharge from the service and expectations being spelled out of the system and the risk share across the system.
It is, of course, extremely difficult for practitioners and for lawyers alike not to use hindsight with knowledge of the most awful events of the 29th of July. I'm going to ask you to try not to use the knowledge of the events and how awfully matters turned out. But just with the information about AR's risk that was known in 22 and 23 against what had already happened in 19, 20 and 21, how surprised are you that AR wasn't referred back to FCAMs?
There were many missed opportunities.
And I appreciate that it's difficult, and you may also say that Dr. Imran may be able to assist on this. But with AR, let's take some of the key points. With AR having had an autism diagnosis, if you took the fact that there'd been some further internet activity of concern, which Prevent had looked at but hadn't taken forward, some incidences of violence in the home, and then perhaps most particularly AR found with a knife on a bus saying that he wanted to stab someone and that he had thought about poison. If that had come to FCAMS at that sort of stage with that profile, are you able to help us with the sort of process that might then have been followed by FCAMS? I appreciate that it's hypothetical and speculative to some extent, but can you help us at all on that?
There shouldn't have been a regurgitation of information that was already available and within the system, but the new information would have been shared via consultation, and there would have absolutely have been a very specialist forensic assessment undertaken.
So you're confident that that would have got beyond the advice and consultation phase and would have gone to assessment?
Yes, because of the complexities. They're very clear. The risk is very high.
Potentially by what, a forensic psychiatrist?
By the whole of the MDT, potentially.
Thank you.
Just before you move on, can we stay with that just for a minute?
Yes, sir.
So, reviewed by the whole of the MDT?
The right professionals within the MDT.
Absolutely. To what potential end? So with what might have come as a result of that? So beyond people sitting around a table thinking about it, what practical results?
There would have been a greater formulation of what was occurring, a bringing together of all of the information that was available in terms of the violence and aggression and risk and extremism that was at play within this case. From that formulation, there would have been plans made in terms of supportive treatments for the family, for the community, and also for AR.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Mr.
Thank you. Not at all. Thank you. Have you had the opportunity to see Dr. Irani's report?
I have.
Thank you. And she concludes in terms of multi-agency working that in her opinion, while there were a number of meetings, in the absence of a lead agency, a clear handover process and appropriate risk assessment, the interagency working arrangements were not adequate. Do you agree?
Yes.
Can I ask you, just in terms of your own reflections on matters, can we look at page 11 of your statement, please? You repeat there, could we expand paragraph 27, please, Sarah?
Thanks, Sarah.
You repeat there the point about the benefit of holding another consultation meeting and the involvement of the Criminal Justice Liaison and Diversion Team in Sefton CAMS having discharged AR and the risks that that gave rise to. But that Anna Kroll of the Sefton yacht had become involved. You say this meeting could also have been used to explore who would be contacting the neurodevelopmental pathway to request that AR's assessment be expedited and to consider what service could have taken on the recommendation of delivering psychological interventions. So should we understand from that that you also candidly accept that although there was the recommendation for the autism to be expedited, or the assessment to be expedited, there was a lack of clarity about exactly who was going to take that on?
Yes, it wasn't clear within the letter. The actions weren't smart.
Thank you. I should give you an opportunity to comment on Dr. Irani's assessment of the risk assessment process. but what it comes to is that, in her opinion, the assessments undertaken in AR's case by CAMS, community FCAMS, or in relation to the risks that he presented, or any safeguarding concerns, again, were not adequate. And should we understand from your previous answers that you would agree with Dr. Irani in that respect?
Yes.
Thank you. Paragraph 30 of your statement, please. You deal there with the rapid review of care that was conducted by GMMH. So for your note, it's GMMH 5 zeros and 8.
Thank you.
Just taking those briefly, I think in terms of timescales, this is not perhaps the most significant one, but I think by the current key performance indicator, the offer of a first consultation meeting was slightly outside current expectations on timetables. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think it's worthy to note that there was a Christmas period in between, but absolutely there was that strategy meeting that occurred a couple of days after the referral was made too.
Thank you. And then the clinical record, second bullet point, the clinical record for AR does not reveal whether letters detailing the consultation were sent to all professionals, and that's a point that we've touched upon.
Yes.
I think you've said has changed since. The consultation letters are well written, so the third bullet point, but the clarity and readability of the letter could be made clearer, and that goes to the point about now being smart compliant. Would you agree?
Yes.
And then the fourth bullet point, the consultation suggested that AR may be displaying traits indicative of autism, and it was recommended to Sefton CAMS that they refer AR to the local neurodevelopmental pathway. And then there's reference to the fact that subsequent to that, with NHS England increasing FCAMS funding, FCAMS now has a greater capability in that regard to take autism assessments itself.
Yes.
Accepting that this was a rapid review, we note within that, and it was a very rapid review, that it doesn't seem to have identified the very significant issue around shortcomings in risk assessment that you've helped us with today. When did those shortcomings around the risk assessments first become apparent to FCAMS?
I can't be precise with the actual date. My understanding was I reviewed all of the systems and processes from September 2023. I would imagine it was in the fourth quarter of 2023-24, where the SOP was asked to be revised and reviewed to be far more specific.
But what about in AR's specific case? I think you're kindly there indicating about when you noticed a need for improvements, but when in relation after the events of July, when there was a rapid review, in AR's case, it hasn't identified the shortcomings over risk assessment. Do you know when that was first identified?
After a rapid review has been completed, there is a patient safety panel within the trust and within the division. It would have been discussed at that point and within that forum. Also, the LPC, the local provider collaborative, took over and delegated responsibility from NHS England, and they have conducted more regular contract reviews and quality reviews in partnership with Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust. This helped greatly.
The reason why I'm asking this, Ms. Brown, for your assistance, is that it might be thought that it's up there as a key identification of a shortcoming in this case. And I'm keen to understand from you how that was first spotted and what was then done about it, specifically seeing that things had gone wrong in AR's case on the risk assessment, the lack of SAVRI. can you help us with
I
how
can't
you think
help
that
you,
came
I'm sorry.
from? Thank you. We might pick that up with others. In terms of improvements, we've picked on several of those. So we've covered the fact that autism assessments can now be done. And I think you wanted to give an indication of some earlier on, and I said that I would come back to that at the end. So do you want to give your high-level summary now? If we can have on screen paragraph 33, it's at page 14. But I think you'd prepared some notes possibly on just highlighting some aspects to the chair. Please feel free to do so.
Okay, so the highlights that were detailed within the report are the LD and autism pathway and new workers, LD and speech and language therapists. We are also going to look for a OT to join the team at some point, which will help greatly. We have a safeguarding strategic lead that works across the CAMS division that helps to support safeguarding concerns and escalations across systems. They would do this with the FCAMS service. There has been a requirement for clearer recommendations in a smart way, also indicating public safety issues and personal safety issues and responsibilities. An audit has been devised and highlighted within the revised standard operating procedure. This also covers distribution of consultations and assessments. The escalation process requirements where things are not being picked up quickly by system partners also forms very much part of the SOP, and that is now in detail. Where assessments are indicated, these are undertaken and there's very clear standards that are set surrounding when to move to assessment. Lead professional forms part of that SOP and how that's identified and what to do if there is an out of area move and or a need for a different provider to take the lead. The discharge is in a lot more detail in terms of requirements of MDT and supervision discussions. There is a new SLT governance assurance framework within the CAMS division and across Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust. There has been a revision of systems and processes within the service. An example of that, Chair, would include the information that was shared earlier. The CCG was actually the local care commissioning group, so that was the responsible commissioning group for AR at the time on the referral form, and also the indication of a conduct disorder in logging a referral was logged basically because that's how a referral is logged, and the nearest definition of a requirement for an FCAMS case rather than it actually being identified as anxiety or depression. Mm-hmm. And those system changes have been made. There are now KPIs, so the service are reviewed against those KPIs within regular contract meetings with the LPC, and also within SLT governance, not just within the CAMS division, but within the care group and wider within the organisation, to ensure that standards are being met that have been set, such as timeframes.
Thank you. And you provided information on that in your statement.
Yes.
With all of those changes and improvements, which I know you've only summarised, could we look at paragraph 34, page 15? Because even with those improvements, against the invitation from the inquiry to outline any recommendations, you said this. It comes back to this issue of the gap. There appears to be a gap in service offer for children and young people who display high risk and high harm behaviours in the absence of a mental health disorder, who would benefit from a structured psychological intervention. Currently, the FCAM service model, as described in the NHS England FCAM service specification, sets out no provision for this, and currently there would be feasibility issues to offering this within a regional model due to insufficient resources, and distances would be prohibitively large for young people to attend a central clinic or practitioners to regularly travel to a venue local to the young person. Yes?
Yes.
And should we read into that your assessment that for AR and for others in his category, where there may not be an apparent treatable mental health disorder, but there are still very harm-risk behaviours and a risk of violence to others, they would benefit from structured psychological intervention, yes?
Yes.
Which at the moment, FCAMS is not commissioned or resourced to provide.
Yes.
And should we also understand that in your experience, inverted commas, standard CAMS is also not able to provide?
Not always. There is a provision within the local integrated care boards to approach for specialist care. I don't think that that has been utilised across all of our regional trusts to its full capacity with these cases.
And is that on a case-by-case approval type
Yes.
of basis? Thank you. So I was going to turn to my left, but I've had a question come in by email from Mr. Nichols, who, Ms. Brown, is junior counsel representing the injured adult victims. And he goes back to the question that I asked you about Mr. Hicklin and the comments about the £5 bet. And when you answered that those sort of comments do not reflect FCAM's value standards and expectations, Mr. Nichols would like to ask why those comments do not reflect FCAM's value standards and expectations.
They don't reflect the standards and values because they seem very flippant. They don't seem to acknowledge the gravity of the concerns and risks evident.
Thank you. I'm just checking with the other teams. So do you have any questions for this witness?
No questions, one request. First of all, to thank you for some extremely helpful evidence, Ms. Brown. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you.
In your fairly lengthy list of things that have changed, you dealt, I'm reasonably confident to say, with a number of things which are not within your paragraph 33. You went beyond that. You also explained them in a rather high-level way. You've already had to put in a lot of work in relation to this inquiry, but I'm going to ask one last request that you set that out in greater detail and submit that in writing by mid-November.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much
Thanks,
indeed.
sir.
You're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll resume with your permission at 10 o'clock tomorrow with Dr. Irani. Also, sir, with your permission, may I give advance notice that because of the realities of the timetable for Thursday, with your permission, we would propose to sit at a 9:30 start on Thursday morning.
Certainly. There was also some reading this afternoon.
So that's going to be, because of the timescales, that's going to be, was in any event going to be pushed back, but it's not forgotten, and we will come to a summary of other psychiatric evidence in due course.
And we've got time for that on a future day.
We will make time.
Thank you all very much. 10 o'clock tomorrow.